For 10 years, one of Britain's biggest football clubs led a secret existence as a kind of exclusive bank. Its privileged clients enjoyed big interest-free loans. In some cases, the money didn't even have to be repaid. The lucky few included Paul Gascoigne, Chris Waddle, Ozzy Ardiles and other sporting heroes. They all belong to the club that liked to say yes.
You're entitled to absolutely nothing, right? Let's make that perfectly clear. We're cooperating and you're entitled to nothing. Do you understand that?
This is Alan Sugar, chairman of Tottenham Hotspur, before an interview with World in Action. The subject is the tax affairs of his new team manager, Ozzy Ardiles.
You're not a tax man, you're not from the police, and you're not from any authority that I have to talk to, and I don't have to answer any of your questions. And let's make it perfectly clear, you are entitled to absolutely nothing. I am giving you what I will decide to give you. And
for 6 months, World in Action has been investigating the football industry. 3 weeks ago, Mr. Sugar released to World in Action a tax file on past and present Spurs stars. Most of the file was about Ozzy Ardiles.
Show it to your viewers. He's paid up all the taxes that he's got to pay. Nobody's sued him. No one's taken any action against him. No government authority has taken any action against him. So, as I say, we are employing him here in a capacity as a football manager. We're not employing him as a chief executive. We're not employing him as a tax expert. We're employing him in a capacity as a football manager.
World in Action's own research has uncovered a pattern of questionable payments and deals involving at least a dozen star names stretching from 1980 to 1991. And tonight, we reveal the contents of a top-secret file detailing a major tax investigation underway at the club and the club's own fears about what the taxman will find. Glory days at Tottenham Hotspur. In 1978, a ticker-tape welcome for two Argentine stars. Signing Ricky Villa and Ozzy Ardiles, fresh from winning the World Cup, was a great coup for the London club.
The moment those two players came out, there was this sort of snowstorm of paper across the ground. And I think that was the occasion we presented the cards to the players as well. So they had their photographs taken. There was a long period before the game when the two players were singled out as being, you know, important, and they were. Tremendous emotions.
These were tremendously gifted footballers, and that's what the footballing environment thrives on. People who have genuine ability. These guys had it. Osvaldo Ardiles was a superb midfield player, probably one of the best of his generation.
3 years later, Spurs have won the FA Cup, but the club is overdrawn at the bank, and 3 stars, Villa, Ardiles and Glenn Hoddle, all wanted pay rises to sign new contracts. Spurs borrowed an idea already tried by Arsenal. They set up a tax dodge, a trust fund in Jersey, to pay large tax-free sums to the 3 stars. Spurs were courting trouble. Before long, the taxman would move in at great cost. The club knew, too, that they were breaking a strict Football League rule, that all players' payments should be reported to the league.
We were very reluctant to go along this path, but we felt that it was necessary to do something to secure the signature of these players. And obviously there are risks attached to this, but we were desperate to keep our boots clean in a muddy field.
We have the best advice, what supposed to be the best advice from leading solicitor in London, and I was happy, yeah. In fact, I was not very much consulted, to be honest. That was the way it was going to be done, and it was done that way.
And you signed for it?
Yes.
We were very well aware of payments being made to players illegally in other clubs, and so were the players themselves. And this would always feed back to us that why don't we do it? And of course we put our foot down and said, no way do we do this kind of thing under the counter.
You broke the Football League rules.
We were advised if we went about it, they warned us of this, but we were led to believe that if we did it in a certain way, then it would nullify those rules, or rather get around them.
Ozzy and Ricky Villa's secret handwritten contracts were not disclosed, as they should have been, to the league. When the league found out 2 years later, they punished Spurs with a record fine. the secret contracts guaranteed the players a big tax-free annual bonus. Ozzy's was £60,000 on top of his official taxable salary of £40,000. Tottenham, already in debt, had borrowed from their bank and put over £700,000 into trust funds in Jersey. Ozzy and Ricky got the interest on the money tax-free. It sounded perfect, but it wouldn't last for long.
In Las Vegas, there's a hotel called the Mirage. It's a very nice hotel, and people go in there and they feel very safe and secure. And when they leave that hotel, 3 or 4 days later, without any money, they wonder what hit them. This trust scheme was the Mirage.
Whilst not in itself illegal, the scheme itself was a cynical attempt in order to ensure that these players received sums of money tax-free outside the United Kingdom. And there appears to have been deliberate attempts by the club to set up the scheme in such a way that the UK tax authorities didn't find out about it.
Ricky Villa had left the country for good and escaped the taxman. But for Ozzy, there was very bad news.
He received a personal tax bill as a result of that, somewhere in the region of £40,000.
Yes.
What was decided about paying that? Who was going to pay that?
The club paid.
How did they pay it?
No idea.
Well, can I put it to you that they paid it rather not by paying your income tax, but by making a loan to you to pay it yourself?
The club just paid, and after that, a few years later, it was part of the loan that it was given to me, yes.
Shares in Tottenham Hotspur went on sale today on the stock exchange. Spurs are the first...
In 1983, Spurs changed. It was floated on the stock exchange. It became a public limited company, a PLC. That meant it had to obey stricter financial rules. It was also in new hands, the biggest shareholder a property developer called Irving Scholar. Derek Peter was the new finance director. Ozzy believed that Spurs had paid his tax, but in club papers it appeared not as a payment to the Inland Revenue, but as an interest-free loan of £43,000 to Ozzy. Over the next few years, Ozzy was given further loans by Spurs. By the time his playing days were over, the book showed that he owed them £106,000. But it was a very odd kind of loan.
What was decided about how and when you would repay the money, £106,000, to Tottenham Hotspur?
That money really was not going to be repaid.
That's not the way it was portrayed to the Inland Revenue. It was described as a loan, which means that it will be repaid.
Well, it was portrayed to the Inland Revenue as a loan. Yes, after that it was for, I don't really know, but they portrayed to the Inland Revenue, yes, probably as a loan that it had to be repaid, and the loan subsequently was written off.
Right. Your understanding was that you weren't going to have to repay it.
No. Did
you not think this was a strange way of doing things?
Maybe it is, but I was in the complete hands of the club, and I always followed the advice of the club, and I was not going to change it.
The difference between making someone a loan and giving them a payment is that if you make them a loan, you don't have to pay tax on it. If you actually make a payment, then it's theirs, they get to keep it, they have to pay the tax on it.
In truth, what Spurs should have done was to pay tax directly to the revenue and not loan you money.
Well, a club can give a loan to any player, really. I mean, as soon as from the FA point of view, as soon as the FA say yes, that is, you can do that, you can do that.
But your loans weren't declared to the Football League, were they?
No, they were not.
It's not clear how many people at Spurs knew the murky truth about Ozzy's loans. But the board of the Spurs PLC were told in October '88 that the loan was still repayable on demand. Yet by then, the club's financial director, Derek Peter, had secretly confirmed in writing that Ozzy would never have to pay back the money.
They produced a letter in 1986 saying that he didn't owe the money. In 1987, they produced another letter saying that he didn't owe the money, and in 1988, they did exactly the same thing. In 1989, I am led to believe that they wrote it off. I believe that that loan never existed.
Summer 1991, another cup victory, but behind the scenes, dreadful problems. Spurs had lurched from one financial crisis to another, and the main shareholder, Irving Scholar, had resigned from the PLC board after he broke stock exchange rules. The club was £18 million in debt, but saviours were at hand.
My first task, as far as I'm concerned, is to get the balance sheet into shape and can safely rely upon Terry to look after the football side.
The computer tycoon Alan Sugar and Terry Venables, who'd been team managers since 1987, took over the club and injected new cash and new methods. Alan Sugar later described what those early days were like.
You cannot believe the skeletons that have come out of the cupboard. All sorts of cretins have turned up saying we owe them money.
One of those so-called cretins was Ozzy Ardiles.
That is amazing, some of the amount of claims that came in as soon as they realised we were able to pay, or effectively they thought we were able to pay. They were wrong, because we still had a lot of financial problems at the time. But that's what that really referred to, and if you like, yeah, maybe Mr. Ardiles' claim was mixed up in that whole lot.
But you patched it up since then?
Well, now I've gone into detail, I can clearly see that, in my personal opinion, I think the guy was badly treated by the prior management.
Ozzy's new accountant, Albert Fox, had launched a campaign to get Spurs to sort out his tax. Since 1986, Spurs had been declaring Ozzy's loan as his perk on annual tax returns. Anyone who gets an interest-free loan has to pay tax on the money they've saved. Ozzy, by now a manager, argued that Spurs had misled the tax authorities about the loan, and the tax he was now being asked to pay was the club's problem, not his. Later, Ozzy's accountant played tough, threatening to expose Spurs to the taxman.
I will never take the club to court, or I will never do anything against the club, certainly not.
Well, your advisor threatened to tip off the Inland Revenue about things, he threatened to...
It probably was a way of negotiating.
And you were comfortable with that?
I'm pretty comfortable with that, yes.
If it was construed at the club that I was giving them a hard time and that I was being aggressive, well, that's great, because that's exactly what it was. However, they would have got a bigger smack if it had been anybody there other than Mr. Ardiles, because Mr. Ardiles was a restraining influence on me.
Mr. Fox, angered by Spurs' delay in settling with Ozzy, put in a number of remarkable claims on his behalf. They included all the tax Ozzy owed on his interest-free loan, £106,000, the loan which Spurs had apparently already written off, and claims for scouting fees. He produced two Spurs documents, one a letter promising £10,000, the other a contract for £25,000 a year for scouting duties abroad.
There's a contract two contracts to work as a scout overseas for Tottenham Hotspur.
Mm-hmm.
How much scouting did you do?
I didn't do any.
Your accountant subsequently claimed money for that. Do you know about that?
No.
All's fair in love and war, really. Ardiles' accountant was actually doing a very good, thorough, professional job, and in many ways Spurs were at fault in that they'd left themselves wide open to that sort of attack.
They were not only acting as his accountant, as employer, but financial advisor. They ran his bank accounts. They organised his domestic expenses. They paid his television licence. They were his wallet.
Is there not a conflict of interest arising out of that? They had to get the best deal for them as his employers, and they apparently were trying to get the best deal for him as the employee.
Let's keep this general. If ever I come across a situation where such an arrangement arises, there is an inevitable conflict of interest.
At first, the new Spurs board was shocked by the claims Ozzy was making, but they bowed to the pressure and paid him £36,000. They also agreed to put £18,000 aside to meet a disputed VAT bill on his testimonial match.
The settlement was all about the tax liability that Mr. Ardiles was likely to incur for the loan that was written off in the books in the company. That's what it was for. It was nothing at all to do with the failed offshore Jersey trusts and all that stuff.
What is the element in the calculation of the 106,000 that says 43,000?
Well, you've got a detailed report of that there. I don't know it from detail, so you can flash that up on the screen in your programme. You've got it actually, a nice list there showing you exactly how it's all made up.
What I'm saying to you is almost half of that loan derived from an income tax settlement that someone at the club...
Yeah, half of that loan was for tax, most probably, that Mr. Ardiles had to pay on the interest that was earned in the offshore trust, yeah.
And that the whole, I'm told that the whole thing was a series of irregular manoeuvres.
No, it's not irregular, no.
Designed to avoid income tax.
No,
I
don't think they were irregular, no.
Well, I think...
But you're not a tax expert, so you don't know either, really.
I think it was put to you that that was the case.
No, it was not put to me, no.
In fact, it was put to the board by barrister Jonathan Crystal, then a Spurs director. He investigated the claims in late 1991. His report to the board, secret until tonight, is damning about the way the club had dealt with Ozzy.
The club, over a great many years, have entered into a number of irregular arrangements with Mr. Ardiles, and they all stemmed from the early 1980s, when Mr. Ardiles' Football League contract did not disclose his true income. There has been a consistent pattern of improper arrangements and schemes designed to pay money to Mr. Ardiles without any regard for the tax consequences or the regulations of the Football League.
The report said that the club's auditors had been misled over the years.
I think what happened was an absolute disgrace. They had consistently failed to look after the best interests of the club, and ultimately I think of Ardiles himself, in that they, by looking after his tax affairs in the early years and effectively mismanaging them, they'd left him wide open to all sorts of problems with his tax later on.
November 1992. By now, unknown to the football world at large, the taxman was hot on Spurs' trail and had been for 15 months. A team of investigators descended on White Hart Lane from the Inland Revenue's special office. For 2 days, they trawled through player files, cash books and tax records, trying to establish whether the club mishandled its affairs before Sugar and Venables had taken over. The taxman's visit ended with a bombshell, a request for £500,000 in back tax alone. The extent of the club's appalling financial history was later spelled out by Spurs' new finance director, Colin Sandy.
I doubt that there is any area where some errors in procedures have not been made, either deliberately or by default, due to lack of proper record keeping.
The new regime at Spurs promised full cooperation with the taxman and asked its auditors, Touche Ross, to investigate. Their report, made public tonight for the first time, reveals that Spurs' problems went much deeper than loans to just one player.
And welcome to the stadium for the big match. Tonight's referee is Touche Ross. Spurs are struggling with serious financial irregularities, but are fielding a strong side. In midfield, Paul Allen. Paul had a striking loan arrangement. Spurs lent him £55,000 interest-free when he signed in 1985, and topped it off with a secret side letter agreeing to pay it all off tax-free when he left. Behind the deal, Irving Scholar, then chairman of the football club. Irving's signature is on the secret side letter. Derek Peter, a former finance director, once asked a sponsor to pay a player's fee into an offshore bank. Sitting it out on the bench, Terry Venables. Terry's £50,000 interest-free loan when team manager was given the go-ahead by Irving Scholar. Terry paid it off last year when his own company got £50,000 from Spurs as a fee for re-signing his contract. Nico Clayson is here from Belgium. When he first signed, Spurs paid him £40,000 in cash abroad to avoid tax. Back from a week-long stay in Hawaii, the 1991 touring squad. The holiday was billed as an acclimatization period for their tour to Japan, even though it's 5 time zones away. It wasn't declared for tax.
Ozzy Ardiles was not the only player with a large loan from the club. At least 11 others, past and present, had had them, amounting to over £400,000.
We realised that there was certain assets, if you like, in the balance sheet relating to player loans, which I quite rightly asked, and maybe naively at the time, are we ever going to get this money back? And of course the only person I could ask that to was Terry Venables. The answer was simply no.
By failing to declare all the loans being made to players, Spurs were in flagrant breach of Football League rules. Some, like Paul Allen's, were not real loans at all. From the outset, club directors signed covert agreements cancelling the debts. Some, in effect, were loyalty bonuses in advance. The player knew that if he stayed out his contract, all or most of his loan would be waived.
Midfielder Paul Stewart was handed a whopping £75,000 loan. He was told he could keep it all if he didn't seek a transfer. England superstar Paul Gascoigne, a £30,000 loan waived when he left with a £70,000 ex gratia payment. And in goal tonight, Erik Thorstvedt. Erik's safe hands collected a sizable interest-free loan.
Well, it was to cover housing expenses. Houses are a lot more expensive here than I was used to, and it was to help pay for that.
Can you remember how much it was?
£50,000.
Have you, in fact, repaid the loan, or do you intend to repay the loan?
I signed a new contract with Tottenham this summer, and because of that, the loan has been waived.
Whilst the Spurs loans were good news for players like Thorstvedt, they were extremely bad news for the club. Football League rules are explicit. Loans have to be like bank loans. They should be repaid before a player leaves, and the club should charge interest on them. They must always be cleared in advance by the league. Spurs say they've stopped issuing loans, and since our interview, they've informed a Premier League inquiry looking into Spurs dealings. The Spurs board at one time considered suing former club chairman Irving Scholar over the player loans. But Alan Sugar now insists that the former manager, Terry Venables, should shoulder the blame.
You know very well that arrangements of players' salaries, including loans, bonuses and all that, are normally conducted by the manager. Let's not try to place the blame on the past chairman, please.
I'm not seeking to place the blame. I'm putting it to
you. Maybe to blame, but don't you assume it, because you don't know. Our board at the time thought it was worthy to look into a situation as to whether Mr. Scholar was responsible financially to any of the ongoing ramifications of this company.
Board minutes show that Spurs took council's opinion about suing Irving Scholar over his handling of players' loans. And former director Jonathan Crystal's 1991 report is damning about the previous board's way of dealing with Ozzy Ardiles.
It appears that one of the previous directors of the company, Derek Peter, was Ardiles' accountant, and he and Scholar were instrumental in setting up the arrangements and making payments. This matter has been kept secret over all the years, and the indications given to me were that auditors and other professional advisors were misled or pointed in the wrong direction.
Neither Irving Scholar nor Derek Peter would take part in this program. Terry Venables declined too. The 1990s have not started well for Spurs or for football in general. Spurs was heavily in debt, rescued, and then the subject of a bitter and damaging feud between Alan Sugar and Terry Venables. The Inland Revenue investigation has led to Spurs placing former directors on a warning in case of future action. Earlier this year, the Revenue again asked Tottenham to pay them £500,000 on account. Football clubs still shudder at the memory of a tax inquiry at Swindon and of the relegation and the jailing of a former chairman which followed. British football is under increasing pressure to clean up its act.
I think that professional football, because of the people it attracts, because the people it has access to, I'm talking youngsters, I think it's got to be seen to be doing the right thing.
This could well be a serious and endemic problem. It's almost impossible to believe, with incidents such as that with Swindon Town Football Club, that these kind of practices don't occur throughout the whole of the football industry.
There are strict rules and guidelines implemented by the Football League that was, by the Premier League that is. And if these organisations are not going to act upon them when things go badly wrong, why are they there in the first place? Why did they exist?